The U.S. has suspended food aid to North Korea after the country refused to cancel a scheduled rocket launch. Washington says this breaks the deal in which North Korea agreed to suspend uranium enrichment and its nuclear missile tests in exchange for humanitarian support. Pyongyang says the launch is just intended to send a satellite to space. For some insight on this, I'm joined by James Corbett, editor of the Corbett Report, joining us from Osaka, Japan. So with this food assistance on hold, how will the North Korean government feed its people?
Well, that, I think, is the real crux of this issue, because, of course, it's being portrayed as nothing more than a U.S. policy to try to get the North Korean government to change its policies. But what the real question is how this is going to filter down to the level of the people. And I think, really, ultimately, the only effects that this will have is to make the people of North Korea even more dependent on Pyongyang and the central power that they hold over the food supply, and further drive North Korea to other sources of food aid, most notably, of course, China. Obviously a rival for U.S. power and influence in the region. So I think this is a clear example of the U.S. shooting itself in the foot if it is indeed attempting to really change the power structure of North Korean society through a move like this.
Now, North Korea having this sort of, I believe it's pronounced Juche idea, this idea of independence from the outside world. So what is this initial acceptance of humanitarian food aid from the U.S. tell us about the situation in the country?
Well, the situation there is horrendous from all accounts, and there have been rumors for years of cannibalism going on in North Korea because of the immense nature of the starvation going on there. And unfortunately, sadly, those reports were confirmed, and those fears were confirmed in leaked police documents from inside North Korea last year, which provided case examples of some of those accounts of cannibalism. Of course, not everyone is living in quite that squalid a condition, but it does go to show that that there are some extremely dire examples of starvation going on there, and the people are very much dependent on this type of food aid. So any idea that North Korea really can function as some sort of isolated community in the international stage is, I think, just absolute pie in the sky thinking.
Now, the North insists that this satellite launch, which was scheduled for mid-April, is for scientific purposes and that it in fact was to estimate crop production there. Do you think Washington should in this case have given Pyongyang the benefit of the doubt?
Well, that assumes that Washington is even being straightforward in what it's really attempting to do with this latest maneuver. And I think really it's important for people to understand the ideological pedigree of this idea that food aid can be used as this tool of geopolitics. And that really goes back to a document called the National Security Study Memorandum 200, which was penned in April 1974 by Henry Kissinger, who at the time was opining that the overpopulation in third world countries was the single greatest threat to the American national security interests. And because of that, we had to start asking the questions of whether food aid could be used as a tool, an instrument of national power. That's almost a direct quote from the document itself. And I think that idea has lingered for decades as this tool of so-called realpolitik, which is really just really a mask for the ability to use this food aid as a geopolitical weapon. And I think if the U.S. was serious about actually challenging North Korea and, of course, its ongoing nuclear program developments, they'd be looking into such things as ABB, the European energy giant, which concluded a $200 million contract back in 2000 to provide the light water reactors to North Korea, which formed part of the basis of their nuclear program. But, of course, that won't happen because one of the board members of ABB during that time was former U.S. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld.
Now, the agreement between the U.S. and North Korea was reached last month. Why do you think North Korea has broken the conditions of this deal so soon after agreeing to it? And it must have known that such a move would provoke a strong reaction from Washington.
It could be the case of them testing the waters and seeing how far they can go with these agreements. Certainly, anyone who's been watching the situation in North Korea for the last several years knows that North Korea moves cannot be predicted, and all of them seem to be not in the favor of their own country's interests. But in a certain way, it does play into the I think the strategy of Pyongyang, which is to try to centralize more and more power in Pyongyang and in Kim Jong-un, and that works to the benefit. The more that the people are relying on Pyongyang for their food aid, the more centralized control they have over the country.
All right, what do you see in general for the future of the relationship between Washington and Pyongyang?
I think that's very much open to speculation at the moment, and it really does depend on the next moves. As I say, Pyongyang and what's coming out of there is just so unpredictable at the moment that I don't think we can really put a definite figure on that. But I think there must be some sort of maneuver here, obviously coming during the nuclear security summit taking place in South Korea. I think the timing of all of this is extremely interesting to watch. And again, it might be North Korea trying to draw more attention to itself as a player on the international political stage, as it is being increasingly neglected for the presumed threat of Iran's nuclear program. So it might even be a type of bargaining chip to get Washington more drawn into the region and more back at the table in terms of coming to some sort of agreement, a broader agreement with North Korea.
All right, James Corbett, editor of the Corbett Report, live for us from Osaka, Japan. Thank you.